Hello and welcome to Talking Salford, a new podcast where we bring back some of our most celebrated and interesting alumni back to campus to rekindle their memories of their time here and find out about the achievements they've gone on to have in their careers. The university has delivered some outstanding alumni over the years, and we are very excited to revisit their Salford journey and learn about how their student experience impacted their career after graduation. My name is Loughlan Campbell, and I will be your host for today's episode, which we are recording here in one of the newer Delphi's recording studios on the Peel Park campus. We've got cameras on us now, as we plan to film each episode, so you can see our lovely faces by watching us on YouTube if you'd prefer, by heading to the official Salford University YouTube channel. Now, it's time to kick things off by welcoming our first ever guest on Talking Salford. A big welcome to Nick Ransom. Nick, how are you?
Yeah, really good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today. Nick is a freelance journalist, assistant producer, and neurodiversity consultant. Originally from the Berkshire-Surrey border, Nick graduated from Salford in 2018 with a degree from our BA TV and radio production programme. Nick found out he was autistic while he was in his second year at Salford and has since become a leading campaigner in making neurodiversity more visible in the media community and founded the Neurodiverse Media Community group. Over the last year, he's worked as an assistant producer on the highly acclaimed BBC documentary Insider Autistic Minds with Chris Packham. As a freelance journalist, he has appeared as an on-screen reporter for Sky Sports News and worked on shows including Four in a Bed, Location, and worked in a variety of roles for the BBC, including as a digital broadcast journalist. In recognition of his achievements, Nick was named the Rising Star Alumni Achievement Award winner at the 2022 Create Awards. That's quite a list of achievements there, Nick.
Gosh,
So first things first, how does it feel to be back on campus?
Yeah, it's really good. I actually came in through the car park where, when I came up for the open day, we parked with my parents, and it was, weird getting out in exactly the same spot where probably I took my first steps in Salford. So, yeah, it couldn't have been any more sort of perfect in terms of storytelling today.
Oh, that's fantastic. I mean, you obviously had such an eventful time here with us as a student. It's weird when you look back on your time here. Now that you're back here on campus, do the memories come back? Is it nostalgia? Are there happy memories? Pride about what you've achieved here?
Yeah, 100%. I think it was. It's still. I mean, it feels like a long time ago, but it was only 5 years. But yeah, when I came back and saw the old Maxwell building, which still exists and looks exactly the same as I remember, it was that sort of brought it all back really. And I used to live on the Peel Park campus for my first 2 years here. So it was my home for two years of my life. And I think I had challenging times at the university, but not through the university's fault, just through my own kind of personal challenges. But then in terms of how the university supported me, I think it's really nice to come back and still feel that level of support that you have really.
What was it about Salford that drew you to wanted to study here?
Well, I was looking at Portsmouth, and then when I saw that there was a university at Media City, I was like, right, well, there's no other option here. Having a university on the doorstep of Media City is just like you want. I'm somebody that won't shy away from the fact I want to be the best I can possibly be, and so I felt like that gave me the best possible chance, and so applied and somehow was let in, and it was I think it was 4 hours from where I grew up, so it was quite a big. I'd never really moved house before I came to university, and I remember the day I left to come to university, and I had this song. It's called "Love Will Set You Free" by Codaline, which is a really sort of one of those sort of really emotional tunes, and I'd been listening to it a few weeks up to before I came to university, and I remember the day when we were driving out the driveway and driving to Salford for that first time. I had that music on, and every time I listen to that, it still reminds me of university, and it was a very emotional thing, living on my own for the first time ever. But it did get easier.
I think that's always the thing about going to university. People come from all over the UK to Salford. People come internationally, and for some, as you say, it's a 4-hour trip. And making that journey at the age of 18 or 19 or whenever people start university, it's a very big thing personally to go through and to try and grow up so quickly. How did you manage that big gap in terms of your distance between here and home?
Yeah, I think, I just tried to focus on the study as much as possible, really. And I think, being autistic, making friends is always quite tricky, and maintaining friends. But actually, I think I was with my people, when it got to the course, and I very much focused on my studies here at university. And I think that's something that will affect a lot of people who are neurodivergent or autistic, is that sort of social element of university. And I didn't know I was autistic when I came to the university, but I tried to get on as best I could with my flatmates, and just tried to focus on my degree as much as possible. But yeah, those nights where it was just, I say I'm not somebody that craves massive social company. So yeah, being in my flat, it was nice to have flatmates I got on with, but I did find that dynamic quite tricky. So yeah, I did spend a lot of time on my own in my room watching football or doing my studies. And I think I don't think I'll shy away from the fact that I think I was probably a little bit lonely at university. But I think as time went on, and as I got to my third year, I was very much happier with who I was, and I met my partner whilst I was at university, who I'm still with now. So yeah, a lot of good has come from university, and I've made some great friends and connections, and I do look at it as a very positive time. But in terms of my, I guess, narrative arc of arriving quite sort of quite isolated and not really knowing who I was, to leaving and knowing enough to then go into the industry and knowing a lot more about myself and the fact I was autistic, it couldn't have been a bigger transformation, really.
Can you tell me a little bit about the process you went through when you found out that you were autistic in your second year, and then, as you say, the process then, how that then impacted you as a student going forwards?
Yeah, I mean, it was a case where I was at sort of in my second year, and I was getting on with my studies more or less fine. I was doing all the coursework and everything you had to do, and I was passing more or less everything with flying colours. And the only challenge I had was that there was a module where we had quite a new lecturer, and they came around and asked what we thought of the module. And as an autistic person, you're usually very honest and blunt, and I was a bit too honest, basically, and kind of told them as it was. I mean, I should say that 99% of the modules were brilliant,
of course.
But yeah, there was this one that I just had a couldn't quite see where it was going and that kind of thing. Anyway, so I kind of said it. Anyway, it didn't go down very well.
I'm sure it didn't.
And I ended up speaking to the course leader and all sorts. And I think there was just a lot of confusion, like, why? But wow, we weren't expecting that from Nick, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think I just kind of, I don't really know what happened afterwards. I don't know if there was a resolution. Maybe I might have apologised and we might have just agreed to, carry on. I don't really know what happened. And then, it was during that summer between, it was between the first year and second year when, this must have been my beginning of my second year. Something like that. I don't know the date. When I was during the summer of 2016, after my first year, I was out with my, I'd gone home for the summer, actually, and my mum had said, because I always struggle in the sort of domestic environment, I think, because, when you're working, when you're in TV, when you're in media, whatever it might be, when you're doing a course, there is a degree of structure and routine, and you can it's predictable to some degree.
Yeah.
But at home, when there's, you've got washing to do, I'm sure everyone can relate to this to some degree, but then you've got your dinner to make, and you've got a plan to have am I having a shower in the morning? All these questions that you have at home, where there is very much, there's not usually a routine. I find that very, very difficult. So at home, for example, and if things went wrong, so at home when I was with my parents, if dinner was late or the printer broke or something like that, I'd be distraught, which sounds ludicrous now, but I think, my mum kind of put it down to, and my dad probably put it down to kind of classic teenage behaviour of just being stressed and hormones and all the rest of it. And then it got to the end of my first, that gap between the first year and the second year, and they kind of thought, he's getting towards the end of his teenage years and he's still acting like a brat, basically. And so my mum went to the doctor and a GP and said, in a nicer way, obviously, but what's wrong with my son, essentially. And then she came home and said, okay, so you might be autistic. And I kind of went, okay, I'll try not to be offended by that, because I had no knowledge of the subject.
Yeah, so you didn't know anything really about it before?
No, well, I knew my cousins were autistic,
Okay.
and I mean, they've got much higher support needs than I do. So I kind of didn't ever think that could be a possibility. And there's been lots of changes in the diagnostic criteria, which has slightly confused things as well, but we won't go into that. So my mum came home and said that, and then a few months later I was at Reading Pride, because I'm part of the LGBT community as well. And I mean, there was music, lights, lots of people. I went with my partner at that time. There was about 10 of us who all went. And I just remember that day at the festival thing, where outside and the stage, that I just couldn't get on board. I had no motivation to be there. I was like, this is so boring, which I was thinking, I mean, no offence, they're lovely people. But yeah, I was driving home that day and I thought, there's something not right here. And I was thinking about to what my mum said, and I thought, maybe she's right. And I remember literally getting home after that event and looking it up and going, what's it like to be autistic and all the rest of it. And I read through the list of traits and went, oh, she's got a point. And so I was at a point where, okay, 0 to 100. Right, let's get the diagnosis tomorrow. And yeah, so I came back to university at the beginning of my second year and spoke to the university GP and said, look, this might be a thing. And so that was the August, the Pride, and then it got to, I think, February when I was diagnosed. And a lot of people wait like 5 or 6 years. So I don't know whether it was for the fact I was through the university or whatever. But yeah, I got diagnosed in Chester, and my mum came all the way up and supported me. And it was a case where it was a blue skies day, and had a sort of 2-hour discussion with the psychologist, and she said, you're autistic. And I think a lot of people when they're younger have oh my goodness, I'm different, this is a disaster to some degree. But for me, it put in perspective everything that I'd achieved, the fact that I was living now 4 hours away from home, the fact that I was kind of living independently at university. And it did give me a massive perspective and a confidence boost, really. And I'll never forget that day where getting the train back from Chester and it being the most beautiful day, and it felt like a massive new chapter. It felt like my life had been split in two, really.
Sounds like you took so many positives from it, really. That, as you say, there was no negative connotations that came into your mind to get the diagnosis. You took, well, this is who I am, and actually it makes sense to me.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the thing that we have, at the moment, and the psychologists and everyone involved in that world say that early diagnosis is better. And of course, I imagine that is the case. But we have to be careful not to say to young people, look, you're autistic and you're 5, and then not tell them that it's okay to be different and say that, and make it a barrier, really. I mean, I think I probably wouldn't have been as ambitious. I might not have come to Salford if I'd known I was autistic. I would have perhaps played it safe and gone to Portsmouth down the road or whatever, and been a bit more safe. So for me, I think, there's not enough positive representation of autistic people. Of course, I'm not going to shy away from the fact I still have challenges, but I think particularly in the country when we talk around neurodiversity, as we call it, there's not enough positive representation. And it is important we talk about the challenges, but also the fact that there can be incredible strength. And for me, that's sort of attention to detail and sort of that very black and white thinking and that special interest, which is media and has been from the age of about 11, 12. So I look at it as I wouldn't be here in this industry if I wasn't autistic.
Let's talk about your youth and your clear desire from, as you say, a very, very early age to want to be a journalist. There's videos on YouTube at that age.
Oh, you've probably watched them, haven't you?
And it's for me, I think it's really quite endearing that it's so clear from watching that young boy at that age that this is what you wanted to do, that you've done a degree to get you to that point, and you've now graduated with a degree in it here. You've had so much experience in front of the camera. How has things gone living that dream since graduating?
Yeah, it's been quite surreal, really. I mean, when I look back at how much I've done, as you mentioned, worked in various areas of the BBC and done a few documentaries now, and also now stepped into kind of reporting on news outlets. Yeah, I mean, if you'd said to me 5 years ago that this is where I'd be, I would have been absolutely stunned. And I think there were 4 months, I should say, after university trying to find that first job before I got a role at Children in Need as a sort of digital social media assistant. And the toughest 4 months of my life, probably, in terms of leaving university. And so it's not always been plain sailing, and there's been lots of times where between contracts I've been sat about for a month trying to find my next contract. And I'm now since sort of November of 2022, I've been a sort of freelancer where I've been pitching ideas to various news outlets and production companies or whatever, and trying to get an idea over the line. And as you mentioned, I studied TV and radio, which is much more of a sort of production-focused degree. And I always say to people, I wish I'd taken journalism. And people always say to me, it doesn't matter. But actually, I do think I'm seeing the pitfall now in the fact that I don't feel like I've got masses of journalistic nous. I mean, I know what makes a story, but actually pitching it and shaping it into a way which is going to get over the line, particularly as a freelancer, where you have to invest in a lot of time of your own to then be told, oh no, that's not great, and so you found someone, and oh right, I'm going to have to change it again. So you spend a lot of free time, a lot of time where you're not getting paid, sort of coming up with ideas, which I think had I done a journalism degree might have helped me more. But then I might not have had the production skills. So it's a funny thing. I'm positive about where I'm at after 5 years. I think it's weird. When I'm with people, I'm a very positive person, but when I'm sat on my own in the car, I'm always a very anxious, nervous person, always thinking about what's next and why that hasn't worked. And this is why I do things like this, to kind of inspire myself again.
No, I can absolutely understand that. And let's talk about the neurodiverse media community. So where did that idea originate from? Was that something that you kind of thought was needed in the industry? And what are your main kind of goals with it?
Yeah, so it was during the summer of 2020. I mean, the pandemic had happened, obviously, and I'd finished at BBC Bite Size. I'd done some work on the Bite Size Daily programme, which was a sort of educational service for kids during the pandemic. And it was a case where, it wasn't through anyone's fault. I just ended up, my contract had come to an end, and I was like, right, let's try and work out the next avenue. And I was very lucky during the pandemic, and obviously, people in our industry really suffered. But I had about 2 or 3 months off maybe, and I did a bit of sort of development of a program idea. But then it was during the time of the Black Lives Matter movement that was all sort of going on, and I was thinking in terms of diversity and what I represent and everything else, and we all had a lot of time to think, didn't we? So I kind of thought, is there a space in media for neurodivergent people? So that's people who are autistic, have ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, whatever it might be. 1 in 5 people, amazingly, are neurodivergent, and so I thought there's got to be a space in our industry for that. And I looked, and there wasn't one, and I thought, well, I might as well just set it up, and was really keen to get it like massive really early on, and then I realised actually slow and steady is actually fine too. And so we're up to about 900 members of neurodivergent media folk, and that's people who are university students. That's people who are in the industry. I've just picked up loads of people along the way, really. And in terms of its aims, I mean, the aim is still make it bigger than it is. But every year for the last 3 years, we've done kind of an event with Screen Skills, who are the big body in TV, and we sort of, I've been interviewing neurodivergent people from my community as a panel on Screen Skills as his website, and we've always just tried to be a community and a space online where people can feel comfortable to promote themselves or find other people. And I say I'd love to spend more time on it, but of course it doesn't bring me an income, which, as much as I'd love to spend more time on it, I do need to obviously protect myself. So I'd love to spend more time on it, and I think it's proof that investment is worthwhile in that. And I've had some great people, some great production companies who have supported the new promotional video that we've been making. So it was set up just to be there, really. And if anybody wanted to join it, then they were more than welcome.
Is it quite surprising that there wasn't one before you founded it? How do you think the industry could do more in this space?
Yeah, I mean, I think neurodiversity as a term is still quite new. I mean, it was actually devised back in the 1990s, but it's only really come to prominence over the last few years. And I think the fact is that a lot of people don't know they're neurodivergent. So as I mentioned earlier, 1 in 5 people are neurodivergent, and I think that the problem is when we talk about these conditions as conditions, such as ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, we always end up focusing on, it's a condition that I have been diagnosed with, and it all sounds very negative, doesn't it? And as I say, I'm not here to undermine the fact that neurodivergent people do struggle and do face a lot of barriers, but actually they have so much strength as well. Like the number of dyslexic directors there are in our industry is unbelievable. That's because, they might not be very skilled at reading text or writing or that kind of thing, but actually visually, creatively, thinking outside the box, they can do that. Yeah. So actually, and that's why I challenge the media to do more in terms of actual positive representation. Because there was a thing with Jamie Oliver recently on the BBC, and it was just so focused. And I know media and journalism is about a story and a narrative and all the rest of it, but it was like, can we even just say one sentence about why he's what good being dyslexic helps him? And so from my perspective, when you talk in the context of neurodiversity, which is very much the idea that it's just a part of human variation, and just like biodiversity, it's just something that, people are neurodivergent, and if we accommodate them and if we make small changes, then they'll be successful as well. Then actually everybody wins. And so, yeah, my point is essentially that, and the point of neurodiversity is that there's not enough positivity around these conditions when you talk about them as conditions. I'm not saying we shouldn't talk about them as conditions, but I'm saying if you reflect the context of neurodiversity within this, then everybody will feel better about themselves, and it's just reflecting on the strengths a bit more, essentially.
Absolutely. I think you've nailed it there. It's about being open about the positives and the strengths that come with that. And as you say, 1 in 5 people, that's so many people that don't know, for a start, that they are neurodivergent, and it's making it quite a reality that it's a skill set which is going to be, as you say, essential in the media industry, whether it's TV, film, radio. Those jobs require such skills, such specific skills, which, as you say, to neurodivergent people are very appealing to have that skill set. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of, as I say, we sort of touched upon this earlier, like my strengths of what I feel like I bring, that attention to detail. I was always really obsessed with video editing when I was younger, and so finessing every single shot and every frame and every audio level, and branding's a big thing, which you may have seen. I'm big on my sort of personal brand online, and so all the, I think when you cover the details, you actually do very well. But I should caveat all this, and I'm in the industry, but I don't really have that many access needs within the industry. My challenges, as I mentioned, are very much in a sort of domestic relationship kind of setting in terms of my personal life. So it's interesting, perhaps, that I say I'm not Clive Murray, I'm not Hugh Edwards yet, but I'm somebody who has done has moved up quite quickly, but doesn't have any barriers. And actually, my question is, people with barriers in the workplace should be at my level as well, is kind of my point. So I think it's that's an interesting thing to bear in mind.
Absolutely. I mean, so on a related note, so in the last year you've been making this documentary series with Chris Packham, Inside Our Autistic Minds, which has been widely acclaimed. It's an absolutely fascinating watch.
Still an iPlayer, by the way.
Still an iPlayer, exactly. Yeah. How was it to make a program with an idol like that?
It was very. I mean, I feel like I've sort of moved on from it now mentally. I mean, I've just been asked in the last half an hour to go and speak about the event again.
Oh, fab.
And speak about the program again and at an event. And so, yeah, it's still a massive part of my life. But it was the most unbelievable experience. I mean, I started that in November 2021, and yeah, I was on that until about July 22, and then sort of worked on the edit until about November part-time, when I was in that sort of freelance world. And so, yeah, it was the most surreal, so I was filming up and down the country. I was helping with casting, so finding people we cast 4 people out of 5,000, which was fun. But then also doing the really important stuff that I feel really passionate about, which is, positive representation, getting the language right, those sort of things we put in place. So that was something. I did a real range of things, really, and worked a bit with the accessibility and how actually we can get the best out of our autistic contributors and building in those sort of processes. So I did a bit of everything, really, and yeah, it was. And the most amazing story out of all of this is that one of the people featured in the program in the second episode, a guy called Anton, he's again somebody you would never suspect is probably autistic, and he is a big football fan, as am I. He supports Middlesbrough, as am I. He lives in Billingham, which is a village next to Middlesbrough, where my dad grew up, and plays football 5-a-side at the same sixth form where my dad used to go. I mean, it's the most unbelievable. And so, essentially, what happened was he was the first person to be cast on the series, and I had nothing to do with it. So he wrote in, and another member of the team interviewed him and said, "Oh my goodness, he just says it as it is." And so he was cast to be on the series, and it was one of those really awkward autistic situations where I was like, right, so now I'm working on this program. So this is a contributor, obviously. There's a line, and there's a barrier here, and I've got to respect my role and his role and everything else. But then we got on so well, it was like, oh right, we're going to become good mates here. And so again, that was something to sort of hurdle from an autistic sort of social perspective. But
Yeah,
but then also at the end of it, when it was all done, we've become great friends and have been to matches together.
Oh,
And
that's fantastic.
it was, and we filmed at the Middlesbrough Stadium. So it was just the most bizarre experience you could possibly imagine in terms of a career highlight, really. I mean, what are the odds of that? Can someone work that out?
I can't imagine what the odds would be. No, that's fantastic.
And so he lives down the road from where my nan is and my cousins. And so every time I mean, there's more of an excuse to go up there now. Not that my family weren't a good enough excuse, but yeah, it's great. It's great. I think that's the best thing that could
That's
have
the best thing
happened.
that's come from it.
Yeah.
And were you so excited to see it come out and start to see how people were going to respond to it? Was there some nerves around that, or was it kind of because it's something that's quite personal to you, or was it just keen to see it out there in the world and the stories being told?
It felt like it was never going to happen, really. It felt like we started in November 21 and it broadcast in February 23. So actually that's nearly
Long time.
almost a year and a half. And it just felt like it will go out at some point. And we didn't really have a date until quite probably January. And yeah, it felt like it was just there was talk about it maybe being December at one point. So it felt like it just kept getting pushed into the future. But then when it did happen, there was a lot of conversations about how we all wanted to do it. And we ended up doing a big sort of screening in London, and we had the whole team there. And I mean, I worked on the edit. So as I say, the guys were cutting it down in London, but and I was doing it obviously in my sort of freelance stuff, but then still watching bits and bobs and feeding back. And so I'd seen all the episodes and I'd seen the finished cuts. And we went into the screening in London and watched it all. And it was amazing because we had 90% of the team there, which was just amazing to have and catch up with everyone because, you know, the programme sort of wrapped and the edit sort of wrapped in November. Filming had wrapped in sort of August. So it'd been a while since we'd seen each other. And we all had this massive screening and watched the show go out. And I sort of didn't look at Twitter for the first 20 minutes and then couldn't resist. And after about half an hour, having seen it hundreds of times, I was just a total mess. And I think that was because, I think partly it was representation, which was, you know, finally we were being seen in a positive light. Social media was 99.9999% positive. Like there was very rarely a crossword against it. So to have A, done my job well, B, have had positive representation, C, to have everyone there, D, to have all these comments and I'd had a few beers and it was I was just a mess by the end and everyone just kept passing me tissue. It was really quite embarrassing actually. Yeah, it was funny.
I don't think it sounds embarrassing, Nick. I think it sounds like I think the key word you said in that was representation and positive reaction that you got from it. It just sounds like such a project which you will remember for a long time and be able to look back on with just so much positivity. Yeah.
What's funny actually, and this is probably the most autistic thing about it. So after the series was finished, I put together a collage of all the photos, a few of the screenshots of the programme and all the behind the scenes shots that I got into a massive collage. I did it on Photoshop. And so I got it printed at the printers. I don't know why I'm telling the story, but anyway, So I bought a frame for it and everything. And it was, to anyone, it would be like perfect. But because I'd not added a bleed, as they call it, on the collage, it didn't sit very well in the frame. So it had cut off all the logos of the BBC Two and iPlayer logo that I'd added on. And so I haven't actually put it up because it's not perfect enough for me, which is a very autistic thing, like that attention to detail of it not looking quite right.
I see.
Has really sort of grated on me. So it's still sat in my spare room, not on the wall. And I think how ironic that, an autistic person can't put up a frame about an autistic program because it's not perfect enough.
Oh, there we go. As you say, that is it's very apt, very apt.
I know.
So you mentioned Clive, you mentioned Hugh, you mentioned the big presenters then. So what's the goal for Nick Ransom then?
Yeah, it's funny. As you've heard, I've moved about across various different areas of TV and digital and now sort of journalism. And I think from me, when I was younger, as you mentioned, there's videos of me on YouTube presenting when I was younger. And it came from a place of, just I enjoy. I've always said that I find it easier talking to a camera than talking to a person, because cameras don't tend to blink or give you a funny look, or as much as we love people and humans, I should say, it's having talking to a camera seems less terrifying, okay. I did that from a young age, and so that still is always the dream, to do that professionally. I think people might look at me now and go, oh, he is doing that professionally, but I've done, I think, maybe 7 reports on air, which, you know, I'm very grateful for and had a great time doing them. But I'd love to do it almost every day of my life, because it's it would make my life less stressful to some degree. But I think, yeah, the sort of long-term goal is to make documentaries. I mean, the role that Chris Packham played in, difficult to say, the role that Chris Packham played in the documentary. I'd love to do something like that.
Yeah.
And I'd love to. I say for me, it's the classic kind of media expression of giving people a voice who don't have a voice. And I think, you know, as I say, being part of all the communities that I represent, it's a really important area, and to do it the right way, as we've said, with sort of positive representation. So for me, it's to be an on-screen representation of autistic people, and to give people hope, but then also not deny the unbelievable challenges that autistic and neurodivergent people face.
Nick, it's been a real pleasure hearing about your story and coming down. Thank you very much for coming down to campus today.
Thanks. It's been good fun.
We really appreciate it. And that brings an end to the very first episode of the Talking Salford podcast. If you've liked what you've heard, do subscribe to us. We're going to be wherever you get your podcast or are listening to us right now for the next few episodes on the feed. Until next time, goodbye.